we're going to do a bit of interaction today. So everybody's going to have a chance to add some bits and pieces to the slides. Feel free to use the chat box, as Rich has already said. And we're going to do, hopefully, get some good content going out this morning. So it should be great stuff. So welcome. This is what we're going to be doing today, some creative game design. Something that's sort of taken my interest over the last sort of 2 to 3 years in terms of what do our game-related practices look like, and how they can be integrated into our coaching sessions rather than just your classic drills. For those that have been on my level 1 courses and level 2 courses, you know I hate the word drill, and most, if not all, of the FA tutors that are out as a workforce will potentially say the same. And we're looking to get some creativity and maybe have a different feel to what the traditional normal games will look like within our sessions. Just a little bit about me for those that don't know who I am. Obviously, I'm an affiliate tutor for the Bucks and Bucks FA, but I also do other tutoring and delivery for various different organisations. I'm a lead tutor for UK Coaching, so doing a variety of different generic coaching courses, so rather than sport specific. And I also am coach educator for England Handball and Rounders England, and just recently Boccia England as well. So been coaching for sort of 20 years and have sort of various different experiences working in a range of different settings, really. So that's me, for those that don't know. And we're going to have a little go at annotating in a second. So what I want us to think about to begin with is the classic go-to things that we put inside our games and training. I'm hoping this is going to work. If everybody potentially can slide across on their screen to the left-hand side, you should see a little sort of grey box. If not this, if you click on the sort of left-hand side, you should see an annotation pane. And on there is some little, there's some kind of T's, there's an arrow, there's lines, there's shapes. And eventually what can happen is you can start to draw things on this area here. You can put lines in, you can get a pencil and put little squiggles. Get a pen here, can do little lines like this. Okay, I want everybody to add in, there we go, number of passes, goal score. So there we go. So I'm going to get rid of my chuff, clear my annotations. So there we go. What are the normal go-to classics in your training sessions that you would put into a game? You can stick stuff in the chat box if you want as well. Or if you're not sure, you can shout it over, unmute your mic if you wish, and then have a little say of what you might want to put up on there. So you get to the game, you said to the kids, if you're good, we'll have a game for the last 15 minutes. What's your condition? What are the go-tos? Thanks, Peter. Number of touches. Oh, can I pass forwards like that, Brian? Thank you. Let's finish. Each player can only score one goal to a score. Cool. Can only pass backwards and sideways. Interesting. If you go 2 up, you can't score until the opposition scores. Ooh. Interesting. Go back to the keeper when you win possession. What happens if you win it right in front of the goal? What are you going to do, Dave? Cool. So we're putting conditions in terms of scores. I like that. Everyone must touch the ball. That's a beautiful one, that is. That's always in there. We'll come to those in a second. Good. Some great stuff in here. So we're looking to get some, there's the classic ones we've talked about, and nobody's put on there 3 touches, which is good. I like that. That was the ones I sort of always go to, like 3 touch max. Everybody must touch the ball. What are the other ones that are normally in there? So many amount of passes before you can go on to score. So there's lots of different conditions in there, but actually, we all finished putting on there. I'm just going to move on to the next one. There's lots of different things that you can get from those sort of payoffs. So what do we get from 3 retouches, and potentially we get technical players with different technical and tactical outcomes. So there we are. I guessed at a few. So 3-touch. Every player must touch the ball before scoring, and left-footed goes up, goals only, for example. And they're the sort of go-to ones that I've seen throughout, and I've used as a coach throughout my coaching career. Tactical outcomes for those, we get technical outcomes, but as we all know in our groups, there'll be some players that need more than 3 touches. So what are we doing to those players? Eventually they're going to go, I don't want the ball. Or it goes down to 1 touch only. And you've got players in your session that need to have more than 1 touch. And so they end up deciding that I don't want the ball. Or they will move into positions where they know they can't receive the ball because they know they need to have more than 1 touch, because it stops them from being in the firing line. Every player must touch the ball before scoring. Great for inclusion, so great to make sure that everybody's involved, because you may get players that start to not pass to other players in their group because of their perceived abilities. But actually, is it realistic to the practice that you are making? Because if similar to one of the situations I just mentioned there, if I win the ball in front of the goal, but I can't finish because not all my players have touched it before we scored, whereas in a game, I'm going to be popping that in the back of the net. So we're looking to see if we can create some sort of realism, but also some sort of and a realistic challenge to our players. Using only left foot sometimes is a big one that coaches go to. Which can be great, and there is a little section that I'm going to come to in a second that we'll talk about in terms of using your left foot or using your second favourite foot. But does it always have to be just that way of scoring, rather than restricting? Can we reward? So other little things I want us to think about is this. So we've got technical outcomes and tactical outcomes potentially from those types of conditions. But like I said, not all of your players are going to be able to do those classics. So I want us to think about how might we create conditions that tap into other aspects of the game. So what social aspects could you include, and how? How could we make sure that our players are actually having conversations and coming up with certain outcomes as groups, as pairs, as we go through? How might you gain a psychological understanding of your players? So what type of activities might you put in games, and what conditions might you put in games that where you can actually find out something, a psychological part of a player that you didn't know was there, because you constantly focused on their technical and tactical abilities. So you might have somebody who's striving to keep up technically and tactically, but by giving them a challenge which works their psychological side of things, you might find that they're forging ahead. So just because they can't play, their technical abilities in the game aren't as strong as they could potentially be, their understanding of it may be higher. So different outcomes that can work on the psychological corner. And then we've got what conditions might affect them in the physical corner. So these are the things that we're always going to be thinking of, especially as coaches, when we're looking at those 4 corners. But what can we do to put a bit of something different in there? So something that I've come across in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years is something called gamification. It's the application of typical elements of game playing, point scoring, competition with others, rules of play, that you use them in other areas of activity. So maybe using computer games as a bit of a guide, especially the age group of the children you might be working with are going to be used to playing computer games and used to going up a level. And so the next level becomes a new challenge. So can we recreate that within a football game context? Because you may get additional buy-in from the players that you wouldn't necessarily get. So something that I'm still trying to explore. I am in no way an expert in gamification in any way, shape or form, but the concepts of it I find really interesting, and it's something that I try and bring into my sessions on a regular basis. So we're going to go through a couple of session plans that I've delivered, things that I've pinched as well from others. So for those that potentially have done courses with me, and there's a couple of people that just started following me on Twitter, I put a lot of my stuff that I deliver and a lot of things that I see, I share, and I put those on Twitter, mainly because I think it's a great way of sharing stuff. And I think in the last couple of weeks, we've seen some real good content being created and coming up with. We had a question the other night on a podcast I did. What's coaching going to look like after we come out the other side of the current situation? And I think it's going to be a case of there will be more of this. There'll be more creativity. There'll be more people going, I'm going to give that a go, see what happens. And just trying to do things in a slightly different format. And I think that can only be to the benefit of us as coaches, but also, most importantly, our players. So this is one called I call it No Going Back. This is also one that Pete Sturgis has done on the foundation phase program that he is head of for the FA. So those that know Pete Sturgis, he does some great work for futsal as well as the foundation phase. And he is a game that I just caught my eye, and it potentially caught my eye for a different reason, which we'll come to the question in a minute. So it's a game-related practice. Somebody already put it in there, you can only pass forward. So very similar practice, but you've got a central zone. So when you're in the central zone, any player in possession can only make a forward pass. In either of the end zones, the ball can be passed forwards, backwards, or sideways, and a free kick is awarded should a pass in the central zone not go forwards. And that rule applies to both teams. Now, I watched this and thought, you know what, if I was delivering a session on one of those three, which one would it be? And I want you to just answer that question for me if you can. Again, by either circling it, or you might find you've got a little arrow on your annotates and you can just go and point to one and your name comes up. Okay? So you can answer that there. What would the content of your session be for that game to be part of your hour or whatever it is, 55 minutes before the team that are on after you are giving you daggers because I want to get off the Astro. Again, you can put your answer in the chat box. I'm passing. Or who put that circle in? Let's put a circle on dribbling. Which is called dribbling. And by the way, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I just want to know people's opinions because that's the beauty of football. It's all about opinions. Sometimes it's not the beauty of football because it's about opinions. Okay, dribbling. Oh, there's been someone's put a shooting in there, or someone with the same pen has put dribbling, passing, and shooting. Combination. But if you were a coach, and I wouldn't say I'm going to do a session on dribbling, passing, and shooting today. That's too many things. I want to pick one focus. I want focus from my three phases of the game. So I'm going to do in possession. For me personally, I would always deliver as part of a dribbling session, because if I see that players can't pass forwards, I want to see what else they can do. What can they do in order to get out of that situation so that they could potentially then go on to make a forward pass? Or can they be creative in terms of beating players? So I would want this to be a part of a dribbling session. I do work with Cheshire United ladies, and I use this as an activity and some skill cards that we'll talk about a little bit later. And I put it in just to see what happens, so they could only make forward passes. And there were players that I'd never, in the sort of 3 or 4 years I've been working with some of the players, I'd never seen them be creative. I'd never seen them take on players because they either play at the back or they were quite happy to get the ball and pass it. Whereas in this situation, they couldn't do that. So they actually took it upon themselves to go and try and go 1v1 and beat players. And it sort of made me go, that's perfect. That's what I would want from this session. Because now when they go into a game at the weekend, if they know they can't pass forwards, they may be more inclined to just take a little bit of a risk, take a player on and try and beat them. If it comes off, brilliant. If it doesn't, not a problem. And especially if you're working with kids in the foundation phase or the youth development phase, you want them to go and take those risks regardless of the outcomes. And if you can encourage that by playing sort of games like this, then even better. So it's really interesting to see that there's been a real mix there. Like I say, there's no reason why you couldn't do it for passing. There's no reason at all, because you want to see what type of movement your players are creating for you so that others can make successful forward passes. Could do it shooting. That would potentially be one of my, it wouldn't be my go-to, but I think it just depends on your players. I think that's what the answer the answer to the question is potentially more sort of towards dribbling and passing, I would suggest. Okay. So just a little game there, and that might be a classic. You might have seen that before, like I say, from Pete Sturgis on the Hive groups that he shares, but it's one that I find quite important and quite interesting. Good stuff. Okay. Next one for me. This is one that I sort of pinched a few ideas from another couple of coaches. So Tom Hartley, who's another affiliate tutor for the Bucks and Bucks, he just recently left Arsenal Women. He's joined up with UK Coaching as a senior coach developer. Very creative in these sort of ideas, and we were just chatting, and this, which is organically how these sessions come about this type of practice, about a bank, players coming with goals, and that's their currency. So I just came up with this little practice here and just call it the Bank of Adam. The first team to score 3 goals unlock the bank. So they might be 3-0 up, they might be 3-1 up, they might be 3-2 up. It doesn't matter, but the first team to score 3 goals can cash in their goals for one of the following conditions. Now, I've chosen 3 conditions there. I actually used this. That picture was taken at Buxley University, and I was using it for some of their first-year PE students to find out how games for understanding could fit into their curriculum. So I chose those rules, but as we'll come to in a minute, there may be another way of doing it. So one goal, they gave me a goal, take a player from the other team. So they've only got 2 goals, but they've got an additional player. Okay, so what's their thought process behind that? They could also go, do you know what? You can have 2 of our goals, so we're down to 1, but the other team are restricted to 2 touch. So they're almost being rewarded for their success by scoring 3 first. But they also might go, do you know what? If we've scored our 3 already, we're potentially going to go and score more. So we're happy to give you 2 because we're going to go and score more anyway. Or if they feel the situation of the game suggests that they can give you all 3 of their goals, then they're back down to 0. But every time they score from there onwards, it's worth 2. And it's to find out the different psychological outcomes like I put on there. So will your players go and score 3 goals ASAP? So will they go, do you know what, if we want to get 3 before the other team because then we get the conditions? Does the other team's goal total change the choice? If the other team has scored 1 or the other team scored 2, does that reflect on the decision they make? Because a lot of teams will look at that and go, oh, we want to get to 3 first because we want to take the 3rd one. Each goal's worth 2. But by the time they get to 3, if they get there, the other team may have scored 1 or 2, so it changes their thought process. And then after that choice, which team will it affect? For me, I've seen it on both sides, where the team that haven't scored at 3, they can lose a player and they just fix that and go, you know what, we've only got 4 players and they've got 6. This is going to be tough. Whereas some teams will go, do you know what, we're 1-0 down, we've got 1 less player, but we're 2-0 down and we've got restricted to 2 touch, so we're just going to go, do you know what, you're not going to score anymore, and potentially go and nick 1. So there's various different ways of looking at it. I also put a little bit of small print in down the bottom. So if you choose not to buy any of the above, so a lot of teams will go, do you know what, we're 3-0 up, we're happy, we'll keep it like that. If you choose not to buy any of the above, then the other team can choose a condition for free. And as soon as they read that small print, they go, oh no, we can't let them have 1 for free, because that changes the complex again. So I've put a question in the bottom there. I think some people potentially might start putting things in the chat, but how else might you include additional player ownership within that practice? Obviously, I'm already giving it to them by allowing them choice. Choice is massive. I'm giving it to them in terms of how they want to go and play the game. So are they going to go and run out and try and score 3 as soon as possible? Or are they going to go, do you know what, we'll just hold fire a little bit because the other team might come at us a little bit. We're just going to play it safe. So what other additional player ownership things could you have in there in that game? Add them to the box if you can. That's a bit small, but if you can get stuff in there, great. Okay, ask them what conditions they want to enforce the opponent. Yeah, can choose their own conditions. or you put one on there and they choose the other two, or you put one and each team chooses a condition for 2 or 3 goals. Yeah, so Dave's got right. So how long we played this for? When I normally play this, if I deliver this on a level 1 course or a level 2 course, I say, right, first team to 3, brilliant, you choose. Now we're going to play for 5 minutes, and we're going to find out what the score is after the 5 minutes. So to find out how they're going to play, how the other team are going to be affected. But it's I found this to be really interesting and find out what I get from certain players that I find haven't shown as much, like I said earlier, the technical, tactical stuff, but actually they come into their own when they're choosing those, because the reasoning behind their choice is really interesting. If Dobson scores, it goes, closes the bank and restarts. Oh, there you go. So these are things that are that's great about coaches, because we're going to go, right, I'm going to take that as a practice and go, right, where can I potentially take it? Which is what I've ultimately done with this. I took an idea that we were talking about and we've run with it. Say as a condition, it's gone. The opposition picked the replacement condition. Yeah, so actually once it's off the table, so you could keep running it open. So every time somebody gets a 3, they come and choose from the bank. Yeah, time limit pressure. Those scores has to do something related to the technical skill of the session to bank the goal. Yeah, that's a good shout. So what would it link to? Yeah, Tony, that's a nice one. That could potentially be a session on its own. That could be a little session on your own there. You've got Tony in the chat box. That's good. Okay, so they choose the conditions. Again, now another way of delivering a practice, it's a little bit creative, it's a little bit quirky, and it doesn't specifically link to football. So I say I've used that for hockey and used it for other invasion games. I've used it in handball. I've done some handball sessions. It still works in exactly the same way, but in a completely different context, because handball is rapid. Goals are scored all over the place. So actually it's far more, you're attacking anyway. So it's a real quick fire game. But it's just another way of looking at a practice. Cool. Let losing team decide. Order of 1, 2, and 3. So actually they score 3, but it's the other team that can choose what happens. So that could be a good thing as well. In here, I've rewarded the team that have gone out and been positive and scored 3. So I've rewarded them with a chance to potentially make the other team less strong and make their job potentially easier. You could flip it round, like I talked about earlier with levels, and say, right, once you've scored 2 goals or 3 goals, you can unlock the bank, but those challenges become harder. So flip it round and say, do you know what? If you give me 2 goals, but you lose a player to the other team, or you can go, you know what? You can they're restricted to 2 touch, or what, in that type of context, so that when they're playing, then they've been rewarded on one side, but the other way you're giving them a challenge. So the harder the more the success they have, the harder you make it as they move through the levels. And find out how they will deal with that, because you will get some players who go, oh, that's not fair. We're 3-0 up and we're losing a player. That's just, and then you'll find more out about that player because they're psychologically being worked over. Cool. Introduce corners in the goal, rewarding extra goal finishes. Yeah, so what I don't want to do too much with this game is add far too much content. There's lots of different ideas coming up there that already could be sessions on their own, which is great. I wouldn't want to give too much into that game, because one, as a coach, I want to keep my stuff so I can spread it out a little bit. I don't want to give all my ideas away in one game. I want to spread it out with my players. So try not to give too much in terms of conditions and targets and goals and things like that. Use that for another practice. Cool. Okay, the next one I've got on to, this is one I nicked as well, a guy called Russ Smith, who does a lot of stuff in the Midlands. He's another affiliate tutor as well. There's a lot of stuff. We've chatted to him about a variety of different things like this. A game of football bingo. So your players choose 4 to 6 different ways of scoring. And it's the first team to fill up their bingo card. and the first team to score house. Again, you play it for a certain period of time. So you would say, we're going to play for 10 minutes. Who can cross off the most of their bingo card and who can complete it? Variety of different ways of doing it. I usually do it where each time a method is achieved, the goal scorer has to come off, chalk it off. But as soon as that happens, the team that have just conceded get the ball out and play out from the goalkeeper and start the practice. I put goalkeeper score in there because a lot of time in this little game, the goalkeepers are sort of not forgotten about, which is something I feel quite strongly about. But that's something for another day. But make sure the goalkeepers are included. But actually, what creative ways of scoring can they come up with? I've gone for just basics and generics there in terms of a right foot finish, a left foot finish, a volley, a header, first time strike, and the goalkeeper to score. But are there any other ways that you could do it? So other ideas might be, your kids might come up with, might be, I've had one where it's got to come off someone's backside to go in the goal. Fair enough. If you can do it, it's creative, it's inventive. Somebody's got to do a bit of skill before they score. So I think somebody mentioned it beforehand. They've got to do something that relates to the outcome of the session before they score. So there's a variety of different things in there. When I've done this before on courses, I've normally given 3 and let the teams come up with the other 3. So there is a little bit of guidance from me, but also I want them to come up with different ways of scoring. Oh, there we go. So Elliot's done this before, Rabona and Nutmeg. Yeah, there you go. So can you score with just being a little bit creative? Because you might have players in your team that know they can do it. So they're like, well, I'll stick it in. It's easy as. Some players will try and be clever and they'll try and score a right foot volley and try and tick off 2. And I'm like, no, one at a time. But at least they're trying to think a little bit differently. And what's that? And Adam trick. What was that, Matt? What was your first bit? And Adam tricked that. What was that about? I missed your first comment. Yeah, the goal scorer ticks this, creating over, brilliant. So then the question that comes after that is, what would the condition give players a chance to take advantage of? And again, you can either point to it with your little arrows or put a little circle in. Yeah, good. Lots of both. Cool. Yeah, noughts and crosses, connect 4. There are lots of different ones. This is within a game context. He's crossed off the goal, he scores. That'd be awesome, because in the goalkeeper might go, do you know what, I fancy a bit of this. I'm coming up for a corner. You've got the rest of the team going, no, stay there. So it brings in a lot of communication in terms of how your team are going to work together to come up with certain scenarios, which then ticks the box in the social corner. So again, some of you are saying you've done this before. Brilliant. If you've done it before, it means that there's lots of practice like this that are floating around. Mentioned earlier, I'm not saying that I'm the creator of all. I take bits. Coaches of these, we take things from other people, and we tweak them, we adjust them, and we put them into the context that we have of our players. Okay. Each team creates challenge on the board for the other team. Brilliant. Let the other team create theirs and go, right, here's your bingo card, all the best. Wow, even better. So you're looking to see what they understand in terms of linking it to somebody else. Magpie it. Correct, Gary. So yeah, take things from other coaches and use them. Cool. So yeah, you can get both overloads in there and creativity. The overload, obviously, from when the player goes off and ticks off the sheet, is fantastic. This is a game that I pinched as well, but tweaked it from different areas. So I know Dave's on, but I went to watch Dave Summers and Matt Morton at Mortville. And one of Matt's arrival activities was a 2v2. But every time one team of two scored, the player that scored ran off, chalked up their tally on the board. At the same time, the other two players, like in the last practice, the other two players got the ball out and went 2v1 against the other player's partner, while the other player chalked up the score and came back in to make a recovery run. And I thought, oh, I like that. It was quick, it was sharp, it was done really quickly. And then I was doing some handball assessments. And one of the young girls on the course, she played a game with 3 benches, 3 teams, and to score you had to throw the bench against one of the other 2 teams, throw the ball against one of the other 2 teams' benches. And I was like, brilliant, I like that. 3 teams, 3 goals. I'm going to mix the 2 together. So in this little practice here, it's just 3 teams, and I deliver this in a variety of different ways. You will notice on the diagram I've got there that the red team have got 4 players, and the blues and the yellows have got 3. I would do this on purpose if I could. If I had it so all the teams were even, then fine, not a problem. But most of the time I would work it so there was 1 team, or all 3 teams have got a variety of different numbers. I always say to players or to coaches that come on my courses that odd numbers are good. There's nothing wrong with odd numbers. Odd numbers are great. We always go, oh, I really want another player. I'll join in. I think people will know my thoughts on that. And if you've done your safeguarding, you shouldn't be joining in your sessions. Have odd numbers. Have 6v4. Have 4 versus 3 versus 3. Because you're going to get pockets in games where there are going to be odd numbers everywhere. And so it just creates a bit more realism. Also, you get to find out which of your players that need work in the psychological corner. In fact, oh, it's not fair, they've got 1 more. That's what happens. So the game is you play against 2 teams. The goals are different sizes as well. So when I normally do it, I just put the bibs on the floor and they just go to a goal. I don't assign them a goal. They just pick one of the 3 goals. And when they get there, some of them would have already twigged that there's one smaller than the others. Some of them won't have twigged, and they get there, look around and go, our goal's bigger than everybody else's. Oops. This is only if you've got the facilities, obviously. But it works upon, can they score a goal in any of the other 2 goals? If you score a goal, one of your players gets one of your cones at the goal and puts it in the scoring zone. But at the same time, like in the last couple of practices ago, the team that have just conceded get a ball out and play straight away. I usually don't have goalkeepers in this, but I would always say that if you have goalkeepers in your team, there's no reason why they can't join in this practice, but they'll just be using their feet, which is absolutely fine. And if you're working with foundation phase anyway, then your whole squad should all be goalkeepers, as you should be rotating positions. So it's good for everybody in that respect. So the first team to get all their cones in the goal wins. In the scoring zone wins. I then tweak it. If I'm delivering this on a level 1, I will send a coach. I will give 1 coach from each team the information, and they go back and feed it back to their players. And I give each group 6 cones, and they've now got to get 6 cones in the scoring zone, but they can choose 1 particular method of scoring that is unique. The other teams won't know what it is, and I want to see how creative they can be, and it might depend on how successful they were at scoring in the first place. So for a team that were the winners and scored all 3 goals, they normally go, do you know what? We'll score with a header or a volley. Fine. Header or a volley, if it goes in, you can put 3 cones straight away into the scoring zone. Some teams will go, we'll just score with a right-footed finish. Brilliant. Because they might not have scored, but they're thinking of ways that it might make it easier for them. There's always been the same ones, first time finish, that type of stuff. I did have one group once, one team of 3. They said, if we shoot and it hits both posts and crossbar and goes in, that's our 3-coner. But if you score by hitting both posts and the crossbar and it goes in, then we can all go home. Because I think it was a little bit too far out there. But I knew that they were creative, but I just had to rein them back in again and go, come on, let's think about realism here. All right. So lots of different outcomes. Again, we've got overload from players leaving the pitch and coming back on. They don't know where it's going to come back on. The team that just conceded, as they restart, which goal are they going to attempt to score in? If it was me, I'd want to score in the goal of the team that just scored. because they're a player down, or I'd want to find out where the big goal is and aim at that one. So it's a massive payoff from one little simple game. I would normally play it for 3 minutes, or until a team scores 3, whichever comes first. And because you put that time limit on it, it speeds it up. If you didn't put a time limit on it, it tends to drag, and players tend not to go as quickly as possible because they know they've only got 3 minutes. They'll go flying and try and score as many as possible, and you get lots and lots of random stuff coming up, which is exactly what you would see in a game at the weekend. So yeah, just another different game. Again, some of the people that have been on my level 1s and level 2s may have seen that before. Just an example of something that's a little bit different, with an extra goal in there, an extra team. Lastly, because I know it's sort of entering towards sort of Q&A time, I use these match play cards by the coaching lab. Some of you may have seen these before. I think these are brilliant. There's a guy called Jack Rolfe, who's a hockey coach. He's actually he's over in Australia at the moment because just before this all kicked off, he went to start a 6-month contract coaching a Australian hockey team. And when he got there, he probably did about a day's work, and the season got cancelled. And now he can't get home, bless him. So he's done some real great stuff to create these match play cards. And they just give you a little bit of extra support in terms of different conditions, different ideas, allows your players to be a bit creative and think outside the box and unleash their creativity a little bit. And it helps you as a coach. Got to be careful that we're not chucking all these cards in at the same time. You've got to cleverly pick which ones fit the outcomes of your sessions. But they're a really nice resource to have as a coach. There's reflection cards in there as well. I tend to use these a lot on my delivery of sessions. I started to use them again in handball. I actually used one in rounders the other day and gave it to a team and said, only 2 of your players can, rather than 2 of your players can score, I crossed it out and put catch. So they had to decide which of their 2 players were going to be the ones that could catch. Was it going to be person on first post? Was it going to be the backstop? Because they're the ones that ultimately need to catch it quick to get people out. Or were they going to go think big and go, no, we want someone in the deep to go and catch? So it was creating lots of different scenarios and different thought processes for different people. So although it was a different sport, still that type of psychological thought processes that were going on inside their minds. So the coachinglab.org is the website address, and it has a little 10% discount code on there. If anybody does want any there, they're a really good resource to have. But I just want to drip them in there because I don't always come up with my own ideas. I cheat slightly because I use somebody else's resource, but they're a really good resource to try and use. The Magic Academy are another one. I don't know if anybody's come across them. Rusty and Fletch, they are fundamentally from rugby, but have got some really nice, good game cards that you can put in, and it does a very similar thing to the Jack's coaching lab cards in terms of supporting you as coaches and coming up with different ideas and outcomes. Okay. So just to summarise, be creative. If you're creative as a coach, then your players are going to do it as well, because you allow it, you breathe that environment. I talked about on the podcast I did on Thursday about how I quite strongly like to create an environment, regardless of where I am. If it's tutoring, whether it's coaching, I want to create an environment where players are comfortable and happy to be. And if I'm creative, then I'm hoping they're going to be creative too. Give players choice, allow players to problem solve, give them something to think about, and provide them with challenges that aren't just technical. So what other outcomes are you going to get in your team? You will have your players that are forging ahead technically, but are they also forging ahead when it comes to the other 4 corners? I've worked with a lot of teams over the years where they're so-called best players. From a technical point of view, yes, they are, but in the unsocial, they're potentially one of the ones that need to, they're striving to keep up, but also psychologically as well. So always think about the variety of, just because somebody is forging ahead technically, are they going to have all the other things as well? And these types of games and problem solving will help you with that. Create competition. So again, a bit like a board game or a computer game, create that competition, whether it's individually or whether it's with a team or within their respective player that they're going up against. And last of all, enjoy it. I think that's one of the most important things for me. If you're coaching, go out there and come up with some really creative games and enjoy it. If you come up with something and go, I wouldn't want to play in that, then don't let your kids play in it. If you come up with something and go, wow, I want to play it, then your kids are probably going to love it. So I would say all of those things in summary: be creative, allow players to be creative too, and you'll get all the other things. So I hope that's all helpful. I hope that all makes sense. Rich, I don't know whether you want to come in now and guide some Q&A or anything.
Yeah, mate, happy to do that. Firstly, thanks very much. That was an incredible, valuable games that you shared there, mate. I took a lot away from that myself, so I'm sure all the other coaches did. Did you enjoy that, Adam?
Yeah. I mean, I need to take another swig of my water because I felt like I've just talked at everybody for the last sort of 40 minutes or so. But,
mate, no one's left, so it's a good sign. Right, questions, people. So you can either do a chat or you can raise your hand and then we'll unmute you and you can ask away. We've got about 15 minutes of questions. So just have a look at some of the chats here. So Matt says challenges can be so individual that you trust less able and afford ahead. Does anyone want to elaborate? If I unmute Matt, will he finish his bagel? Let's find out. Hello, Matt.
Right, gents. Bagel's done.
Mate.
Was it crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Seriously, it's only crunchy.
Oh, it's the only way.
Just want to elaborate on what you just ran the challenges individuals, the less able and forging ahead. Comment.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a conversation with a couple of the other guys, and it was taking the player cards, and this is not because Adam's on the presentation, but this is the bit that really resonated with me during my level 1 was the creative element. So introducing kind of individual player cards so that you're assigning them to players. You're addressing real individual challenges. So those that are forging ahead or those that are struggling to keep up, you're giving them challenges that are relevant to them. And the bit that I kind of introduced, again, I think this might have been an Adam one, is gold cards. So if you start achieving them, at the end of a session, you count up how many gold cards you have, and then you're trainer of the week. So it was just the kind of continuous gamification, continuous challenges that are individual to those players. And they relate it to famous players that they see on TV every day. So it's just ticks everywhere for me on it.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers, Matt. Mate. Jim Fallon. Let's just go to Jim. So many people in there. I'm trying to find the. Hello, Jim.
Hello, mate. Yeah, I was just putting out the idea that when we're thinking about creative practice design, should we still be bearing in mind realism? How important is that? Just any thoughts on that, really?
Cool. Thanks, Jim. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, there's always got to be realism in your practice. And that's why these games, I'm always thinking about it looks and feels like a game. So it's a game-related practice and there's conditions within it. You're always going to have certain things where you're going to have trade-offs and payoffs where you might, because you want a certain outcome, then you might have to forfeit some other side of the game. But as long as you are open with your players and saying that, I think it becomes, like I said, there are some conditions where people are saying win it in the final third and you've got to play back to your goalkeeper. That for me would be unrealistic, because if I've won it in my final third, I want to go and score. I want to go and finish. I don't want to have to play all the way back, regardless if we've just worked on keeping possession or not. But that's just me personally. So yeah, always keep realism into it. But all I'm suggesting is that we find creative ways of finding different things out about players. But I would always say do things in games. The more you can do in games, and the more it looks and feels like a game, then your players are only going to feel that benefit when it comes to the weekend matches. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
I was just going to add, I think sometimes it's not a bad thing if players are frustrated with the conditions or the setup as well. You've got to persevere sometimes.
Yeah.
I've done games where I've basically thrown 2 balls, into the match so that they're playing it, and some of the kids are looking and think, well, this isn't a proper football game. But I don't know, sometimes you just got to see how they persevere. Perhaps it's the bit in the psychological corner. So, like you say, I think if the players are engaged and you can work through it, recognising that they might be frustrated at times, then it's all good, isn't it, in the long run, I think.
Yeah, because there will be players that are going to, and you'll know them, that will get frustrated at certain things, and you potentially will put those conditions in because you want to poke them. You want to go, do you know what, I need to work on you today because I want you to realise that this is what happens, so that when they go and play on the weekend, they can see that actually you've done it for the right reasons. It's little things like if it goes out of play, you give a throw on the other way. Like it's a blue throw. You go red throw on, and what's the reaction of the other team? Are the blue team going to go up in arms? And that's when you have to go, right, if you do that at the weekend, then you're at risk of being sin bin, booked, whatever it might be, because of your reaction towards the officials. And sometimes you've got to do that in your games, like you say, just not wind them up, but just work them over psychologically, so you can then talk to them in training rather than having to keep talking to them on match day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Thank
Cheers,
you.
Jim, mate. Great question. Just to do a little shout out, Gary Tinkler, who's created his own player cards, and he's going to share them on Twitter. His handle is @Tinkler5. So he'll send a Dropbox out. I hope you don't mind, Gary. You might get 45 more followers. But thanks, Gary. It's really good share.
More for everybody as well.
Yeah, send them out by post. It'd be great. But no, another reason why we're trying to stay connected with coaches is you guys sharing each other's resources, really. So it's fantastic that you're able to do that. So thank you, Gary. David Summers, I do 2 teams now, under 10s and under 14s. How would adapt the sessions between the 2 groups, taking into account the age difference? Let's get Dave on here. Hello, Dave. David, you there?
Dave.
Let's assume he's unable to speak. That's fine. Adam, just ran that question then about the adaptive sessions.
I would just change the conditions, or I would leave it the same because you might get a different payoff. So, like I say, I do this with young kids because they like how a little bit random it is, a little bit different it is. But I'd also do it with adults because you get different payoffs. Like I say, I did the forward passing one with Chesham ladies, and there was something I got out of it that I didn't think I was going to, like seeing players being individual and being creative that I wouldn't normally see. And similarly to the 3-goal game that I've used before, adults tend to look at it in a completely different way, and they will still be as creative and still come up with some really strange ways of attempting to score. So I just think it's the thing you've got to work out is that if it works for your players, and we mentioned it on the podcast the other night, you know that the more you know your players, the more you know what conditions you can or can't put in and tweak. It just depends on the ability levels. If you've got a high level of ability in your players, then you might make some of the challenges that much tougher because you want to push them. But the bare concept of those games and practices that I've delivered, I wouldn't tweak them any differently. In terms of what it looks like and feels like, it might just be just those little one or two things regards to content. Is that all right, Dave?
Cool. Thumbs up from Dave. Cheers, Dave. Sorry your audio is not working again, mate. But good to see you. Let's do a shout out to Matt, who's happy to connect with other coaches too. Matt Ski MK is Twitter handle. So again, yeah, great to connect to you guys. Elliot said reward, not restrict. I assume was that. I'm just going to get Elliot in. Hello, Elliot.
Hello.
Is that in response to David's question?
It was just about saying about realism. So obviously, if you're putting on restrictions on a game, then obviously you might get a specific outcome that you want. But in terms of you want to make it realistic, sometimes if you reward players, for example, if you said to a player, for every player you beat, you're going to get 3 goals. You'll see players that want the reward trying maybe to beat players, but you might be able to then go, when is the right time? So you're not forcing them to have to do it, but you're still encouraging the behaviour, and you might really focus your praise on the ones that are doing it, but not restricting them, so it becomes more like a game.
Yeah, and that's why I sort of mentioned at the beginning the sort of the left foot only score. If you it only counts if you score with your left foot, or only counts first time finish. Actually, so if I score a goal with my right foot, you'd say it's not going to count because in the game it is.
Yeah.
So it might be you go that's worth 1, but your first time finish is worth 3.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that's what I would always promote. That actually, that's not say you have to score, but you can score. But it's worth more if you do it in this way.
Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. That was kind of my point. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And you're quite right. And always want to reward players for trying something rather than saying, "Oh, great goal, but it doesn't count." By the way.
I think it was Mick Lewin on my level 2 said that he watched a session once where a kid got the ball, beat 3 players, smashed it in the top corner, and the coach went, "Oh, that don't count because you didn't do this." And it's kind of like that's exactly what you want a young player to do. So and now they're thinking, well, if I'm not being rewarded for that, I'm not going to do it again. So you've got to be careful when you're restricting young players.
Myself and Mick have had little conversations on Twitter and as tutors about that sort of stuff, the things that you see. And it's not because coaches they're doing it on purpose. It's just potentially what they've picked up from somebody else.
Yeah.
They used to do it. As a coach, I used to do that sort of stuff. You can only score with this, but I've just picked up stuff from people along the way and gone, let's make it feel like the game and just give a little bit extra to somebody who does what you want them to do. That's linked to the outcomes of your session. So
Ben Bartlett's got a good little diagram. I'm not sure if everyone's seen it, where it goes reward, restrict, relate. So you can go from one to the other. So you might make it a little bit more unrealistic to get repetition, but then you might go, right, now we're going to go into a game. Can you recognise when to do it so they know the difference? Yeah,
I think Rivo touched upon that on the podcast we did on Thursday, actually, about Ben Bartlett stuff. He's done some really, really good stuff in terms of the 3 R's. Making it, maybe give that challenge in there so it does, like you say, it does feel a little bit, that wouldn't happen, but then can you then go and put it into a game situation? So Ben Bartlett stuff's really good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes,
Is that right? Thanks, Elliot.
Yeah, really good. Thank you.
Cheers, Elliot. Just going to give it a few more seconds, see if there's any more questions coming in, Adam. Jim said, thanks, Adam. And all great hour. So thanks, Jim. Sign in. Glad you enjoyed it. So you just like to move on to the next slide, Adam?
Yeah.
Just while we're waiting, any more questions.
Oh, who's that?
Look at that, Mr. Rivers. So we've got a podcast. Those who may not know, she's had 2 series out, so they're out already on all good podcast apps and available to listen. So some great discussions with local grassroots coaches, tutors, and brilliant. So get a listen to that. Series 3 is coming out very soon with a series talking to pros and ex-pros. So Paul Davis of Arsenal, Graham Wesley of Stevenage, and Jade Moore of currently, well, not anymore, she's just moved to Orlando from Reading, England World Cup player as well. So some good stuff coming up. Next slide, please, Adam.
Oh, I clicked the button, it's not worked. Yeah, there we go.
No. Thanks, Callum. Highly recommend the podcast too. Cheers, mate. And just what's coming up next. So we're going to have it says 11 o'clock. It's actually 11:15. Apologies. But yeah, another 15 minutes time is a coaching Q&A session in this room. So if you stick around, if you want to make a cup of tea, resume in 15 minutes. It's basically myself, River, and Simon East. Adam may join us. More than welcome to. He may not. And
what's the game? Oh man, nah.
But yeah, so 15 minutes. It's just call in and just ask us any questions that you may have. And next slide, Adam. Oh, that was it. So yeah, massive thank you again to Adam, firstly for doing this. He didn't have to do it, and we really appreciate his time at the county. So it's great that so many people were able to share this. So thanks, mate.
No worries.
And I suppose just no worries at all at any time. I'm sure we'll see you again very soon. In terms of people that listen, obviously difficult time at the moment. So it's great that you were able to dial in and we're able to offer some kind of respite from the madness as such. But importantly, stay safe, take care. And if you do want to stick around for the coaching Q&A, stay in this room. Get yourself a cup of bagel, peanut butter, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.